Welcome to the Blueprint where the goal is to be whole. I am your host, Charles Irving, and today is day 22 of 40 days of fasting. Um, Normal day. Uh, Actually, I went to go get my car worked on earlier this morning. Got up around 6:30, headed out, made it to the spot when it was first opening up. I probably should have waited until the afternoon, as my mechanic told me. He's like, first thing in the morning, there's like 10 people. I'm like, what? Like, what? Like, I thought y'all would be busy later in the day. He's like, nah, we're busy first thing in the morning. So, I was there for a couple hours. Uh, Not even a couple, I think I was there for like 4 or 5 hours. And I was supposed to do laundry this morning afterwards, but I was like, man, I am exhausted. Just sitting around waiting for my car to be fixed, and it wasn't that, I just needed an oil change. I needed to make sure that my coolant was replaced because I hadn't changed it in for a very long time, and I got like 300 and almost 335,000 miles on my car. So I got a lot out of my car in the last 5 years that I've had it. So praise God for that. But yeah, I came home and decided to take a nap like usual because my body was just tired. Got up and actually, I don't know when this happened, and it's what I want to talk about. And that's choosing a spouse. Because either it was this morning or when I got up from my nap, I was thinking about the fact that, man, it sucks being alone. Like, it really does suck being by myself. And I just said this quiet prayer, like, Lord, I pray you send my wife soon, because I don't like this. Like, you said it's not good for men to be alone, and I get it. There's times where we have to be with you and things of that nature, but this sucks. Um, and that could be compounded because I don't have friends and family around me. But I do know that I would love to be married again. And what was interesting was around the same time that I had that, not, it wasn't around the same time. When I had that thought, it was, I said the prayer and kind of went on about my day. So when I got up, I believe I started reading my word. And I was reading Second Kings, somewhere. I don't know where I'm at right now. I think I'm in like chapter, I don't know. But reading Second Kings, and I had read First Kings probably the, second or first, second week. So I'm in, Second Kings now. And I noticed something. Every time there was, and I've this is interesting because this particular thing I never noticed before, but the thing that I'm about to share with you about the different people that I'm going to talk about. So I've always noticed that there was always like this situation, like there's this, I don't know if it's a pattern, I don't know what to call it, but there would be like, let's say King David, right? King David is the prototype king that God wants to lead his people. He's the one who is considered to have done right in the eyes of the Lord, except for what he did to Uriah's wife. But everything that God commanded him to do and God wanted him to do, except for that one thing, he did. But God still considers him the blueprint for leadership in terms of leading his people and ruling them, and how he wants to rule them, because God specifically raised David up to do all that he had in his heart and mind to do as the king of his people. So in essence, David was had he not done what he did with Uriah, he did exactly what God would do with his people, because he was raised for the specific purpose of doing all that God had in his mind and heart to do for the children of Israel. So you got David, this king who in the eyes of God did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and then everybody else is now compared to David. So the Bible will say stuff like, and let's say King Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord like his father David did, or Hezekiah did what was right in the eyes of the Lord like his father David did. So everybody was compared to David. But in between these different kings that did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, there was like 7 or 8 who didn't. They would do evil in the eyes of the Lord, and the Lord would have to send somebody to basically chastise them in hopes that they would repent and change. Like, that's one of the other things that I'm seeing now about the Old Testament that I didn't see many years. I won't even say many years ago, a couple years ago. And that was, I used to think that, God is just killing folks, but God is not just killing folks. He is trying to get his people to repent because they're not listening. But you'll have these kings, right? Throughout, after David and Solomon, God tears the kingdom apart, and there's these kings who are constantly operating in idolatry, constantly doing things that they should not be doing, and then constantly they're constantly leading people into sin, the children of Israel and Judah into sin, and God has to constantly deal with them. And then there's like one king who will do what is right in the eyes of the Lord, and he'll tear down their high places that they worship other gods, and he would restore, the temple, and it'd just be amazing. But what I noticed that I never noticed before, and I said this before, I got to go back and just double check, but what I think kept coming was that whenever there was a king who did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, they would mention his mother. And his mother was such and such, and his mother was such and such. And I had never paid attention to that before, but for whatever reason, I won't, I think it's in combination with what I had thought and prayed about this morning. And that was just the influence of a spouse or a woman. And it didn't dawn on me. It was just like, why do you keep mentioning a woman? Like, after the king who was doing right, you would mention her, but you would never mention the king who, at least I didn't catch it. I don't know. He could have, but I don't know. I have to go back and just double check. But it was just interesting to me that I would notice that every time it was a king who did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, the mother was mentioned. Usually it would be the father. He was the son of. He was the son of. He was the son of someone who had committed a sin, and he walked in the ways of his father, such and such. And I was sitting in the car this morning, or maybe it was this morning, and I was thinking about that. Like, why I don't get it. Like, why do you keep doing that? And the revelation I got was that, one, that was the question. That's why I was thinking about it. How is it that you have these great men who do these great things, and then their children end up like crazy. Like David is the he's this gold standard, right? Of wisdom, of humility, of authority, and the right use of power and honor, and he's a warrior. Like, and then his son Solomon, who is the wisest man on the planet. There has been no one before him like it, and no one after him except for Jesus. That's how dope Solomon was. And yet even he was led astray. I'm like, yo, how do you be the wisest man on the planet and even you can be led astray? The power of women. This is the interesting thing that I started to see. And I was like, well, it just doesn't make sense, because you have the example of your father in front of you. And this is what's interesting. There would be like this great king, and then he would do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and then his son would do something stupid. And then you'd have another great king who would do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and then his son would do something stupid. And he would go and worship other idols. It's like, how do you do that when you watched your father worship the one true and living God, and then you go worship someone else? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And then I realized you can't look at their context from the same context you understand as it is today. And I was like, oh, that's right. See, when we think about fathers today, we talk about fathers being in the home and how they are, involved in their kids' lives, and how they are, being a great example and all these different things. But back in the day, and when I say back, I'm talking about thousands of years ago, that wasn't the case. Well, I can't say that wasn't the case. When you have a situation like this, where you're talking about a person of great standing, a king, a wealthy person, right? David was a warrior. He was a warrior king. And what I mean by that was, when he was king, he was still going out into battle fighting with his men. Even though he had a general, he was in the fight with his men, which meant he wasn't at home. And he couldn't have been at home for months, because they would go raiding. Basically, they out robbing people. We about to come and rob everybody. We going to Gath, we going to Gilead, we going to Edom, we going wherever. We robbing everybody. We about to plunder everybody. So David would go out on his military campaigns as a warrior king. He was in the battle. He can't be in the battle and be at home. So who is teaching his children but his mother? And not just his mother, his advisors. Because I believe back then they had certain people that would help raise the children in a certain way. So if you don't have a father who's there, then the support system has to enforce the values that the father himself operates in. Otherwise, the child is going to go astray. And I was just like, oh, this is wild. So when I kept seeing the comment where it would, if it was a king who did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, that the mother's name would be mentioned. I'm like, that right there, that was the revelation. His mother was your mother's the greatest influence when your father's not at home. And she is the number one trainer of the child, provided that, you know, they haven't given some sort of instruction to the leaders. But for the most part, she is, if she's in great standing with the king, she has power and authority. So she tells, these other leaders what to do and how to do it and so forth and so on. Why? Because she's the king's wife. And when you have a king like David, who had multiple wives, you see this context play out that's very, very interesting. Or at least in my mind, right? I'm like, yeah, this has to have happened because in other stories it's happened. And it's just a way of life. You got multiple wives. Clearly, they're going to be jealous of each other. Clearly, they're going to be jockeying for position. And when you are a wife of a king, clearly you're going to be doing stuff to try and get your son to be the next king. Why? Because if your son is the next king, that gives you power over the other women who are in the life of the king that you're married to. So this is a whole dynamic that the Bible doesn't really get into in every story, but you can kind of piece how certain things might play out from different parts of stories, especially with Jacob and his two wives, Rachel and Leah, and how, they had done things against each other, how Leah treated Rachel because Rachel was the one that Jacob loved, and how she would do things to antagonize her. How I think her name is Hannah. She was the wife of I can't think of her husband's name, but he had other wives, but she didn't have any children, and she was being antagonized. You could see how all this plays out, and it's like, yo, this is probably how this is playing out. So you have these women who, depending on the character that they have, play a vital role in how your children function. Because you're off doing business, you're off, doing military exploits, you're off, working, right? Trying to bring home and food and maintain a roof over their head and so forth and so on. As the husband, you are responsible primarily for protecting and providing, right? That is mandate. And training your children in the way in which they should go. But the way in which that works when you have a partnership is that if I'm out working and doing all these things, then you got to make sure these kids operate with the same values that we have established. So you got to train them. And I'm sitting there like, oh, okay. I'm starting to see, right, some more of what this kind of looks like and the impact of the woman in your life. As I'm thinking about remarriage and being in a relationship and the woman that the Lord would bring into my life. One of the points that hit me was the wife you choose can change the trajectory of your legacy. Now, outside of Solomon, I think he was the one who was probably raised right because he had wisdom. And even David acknowledged his wisdom before he prayed for wisdom, and got the kind of wisdom that God had given him. So he was already a wise person, but the level of his wisdom, God had added understanding and insight so that he could govern properly. Most people don't recognize why Solomon asked for wisdom. They fail to think about the purpose The wisdom was not for Solomon. Everybody, God, give me wisdom. Give me wisdom. Why? So you can do what you want. But that's not the reason why Solomon asked for wisdom. Solomon asked for wisdom so that he could govern God's people in accordance to God's heart. That was why it was such a thing that pleased the Lord, because he was doing it for the reason of governing his people in accordance to how his father did, because he didn't think he could. So, get off my soapbox on that. Just different topic, another day. But Solomon, even though he was raised right, how did he become led astray? Women, foreign women, women who did not share his same values. And that was just like, oh, I'm starting to connect certain things between the statements of acknowledging the women in the lives of the children who did right in the eyes of the Lord, and how women are in Solomon's day led him astray. Now, God didn't have any problem with him having multiple wives when they were women of Jerusalem and Israel, but he forbid him to have foreign wives because he said they will lead you astray. And when he got older, that's what happened. I'm getting old. It doesn't really matter. We can go do this. I just don't feel like dealing with you right now. And God was like, nah, bro. You're not going to go worship other. No, that's not going to happen. So one of the things that happened for me many years ago, when I first got the car that I have, and it's interesting that I made this connection in terms of relationships, but it's not that it's interesting. It's just my mind is going back to when it happened. Sorry. But I was going to buy the car that I have now, and I was buying it for my ex-wife. And I was going to go buy another car that she kind of liked. Turned out she didn't actually like the car. But that same day, God led me to the car that I have now. He was like, go to this dealership, go to that dealership. And then he was like, what was interesting was the first car, I was just going to buy, I was about to buy it, even though it had a salvage title. I was about to take a risk that wasn't, it was like, why would you do that? It has a salvage title. Yeah, it's at a car dealership, but it has a salvage title. You're going to have all kinds of issues with this car, and you're just trying to please your wife. Don't do that. Don't be unwise. That's not a good thing to do. You don't know what's going on with this car, where later on it's going to break down. So I decided not to get the car. But when I went to this dealership to get the car that I have now, God said, what's your criteria for the car you're about to choose and the relationship you're about to be in? So what do you mean? He said, when you go in there, they're going to ask you all kinds of questions. You're going to have to fill out all kinds of paperwork regarding who you are, what you have, right? And you're going to have to answer a whole bunch of questions to see if you fit the criteria for the type of person they want to be in relationship with. That's why they're pulling your credit. They're trying to find out how much money you make. They're trying to figure out, again, do you have what we are looking for in terms of someone we want to be in financial relationship with? Because, hey, we're about to give you some money, right? And you're going to get this car, but can you pay us back? So forth and so on. They are trying to figure out if you're the type of person, character-wise, not just character-wise, but do you have the finances? Do you have the resources to determine whether or not they want to be in relationship with you? What's your criteria for being in relationship with them? This is not a one-way street. You shouldn't go into a situation where you don't have a criteria. And I was like, I didn't know. You fill out some paperwork. You're not thinking about whether or not you they are the type of people you want to be in a relationship with, aka in business with, because that's what this is. It's a business transaction, but you're still in a relationship. There's a contract here. Never once blew my mind, right? So I came up with my criteria, and for the most part, I got everything that I wanted, and I still have this car, till this day. And God willing, I'll have it, until God brings me into a better place where I can get a new car. But over the years, you know, he was like, this applies to any relationship you're in. And, now that I'm getting remarried again, it's like, no, this applies to that too. What is your criteria? And I was like, yo, what is my criteria? And it's not that I didn't have one. I just didn't have one where I thought about it, where I could break it down and say, oh, these are some things that are important to me, that's vital for me to be in a relationship with someone, especially if a spouse, because again, at the end of the day, yo, she's going to be the one influencing your decisions as the one God has, ordained to partner with you. And she's going to be the one to influence the raising of your children, aka your legacy, and what they are able to do. And I was just like, yo, okay. So I was thinking about, different things that I valued in women over the years, the reasons for why I dated certain women over other women. There have been situations where, women that would drop dead gorgeous, and I just could not be with them. And when I thought about it, it was like, oh, that's why you can't be with them. So I just, wrote down a couple of things. When you're thinking about choosing a relationship, when you're thinking about choosing, friendship, spouse, this, we're talking about spouse, but you can apply this to friendships or business relationships, whatever it is, going into a deal, buying a car, whatever it is, right? You need to think about what your criteria is. Um, and that criteria has to be based on what you value. And, the first thing when choosing a spouse, I'm like, God, you choose. I lift my hands unto thee, O Lord, because I can make some very unwise decisions in regards to the woman that I choose, simply because I'm a man and I'm not thinking straight all the time. I'm not thinking with this head, I'm thinking somewhere in other ways, right? So I'm going to need your help, Father, in regulating my emotions, especially when I have been deficient in certain things as it relates to women in my life, from care and love and commitment and all, just, and just affection right now, right? You're just deficient. So it's like, I can't necessarily trust myself when it comes to making a wise decision about the woman I would date or marry, simply because, yo, one, I've been out of, I haven't dated, and I've never really dated. It's like, yo, if I like you, that's pretty much it. Like, I don't really, it's just not what I do. If I'm gonna, if I've decided that I'm gonna spend my time with you, I'm not really focused on anybody else. It's just, I might be interested and attracted to other people, but I'm gonna put my energy and effort into you. That's just me. Wasn't always that way. uh, so, but there's a couple of things that came to mind as I thought about, choosing a spouse. And one of the questions that I would ask myself, and you could ask yourself, is, do I like her as a person? Do you like him as a person? Right? Can you have a nor? Are they jerks? Are they, just? have bad attitudes. Uh, like I said, girls that would drop dead gorgeous, like, yo, she's trying to get at you. Oh no. Why? I can no. Now, this is before, right? This is early when I was still like, yo, I'm trying to get at it. So, God was in my life, but I was still doing a lot of the stuff that I was doing prior to. So it was just like, nah, I'm not. And I've always had a rule, and I didn't realize, like, no, this is something that is vital to you. So my rule was, if I can't see myself getting you pregnant, I'm not messing with you. 100%. That was my rule. If I can't imagine myself getting you pregnant and being with you for the rest of my life, because I know I'm going to be in my child's life for the rest of their life, which means I got to deal with you for the rest of my life. And if I don't like you as a person, I'm not going to want to deal with you. So why would I want to be attached to you forever? I'm not doing that. So any girl that I had been with, it was because, yo, I could see as a person, I can deal with them. If I can't, if I cannot deal with you, I can't. I don't like your attitude. How you handle difficulty, how you handle, when you get upset. I just don't want to deal with it. Now, some people can, uh, hide their true colors, and that happens. But um, this is why friendship is so important. I want to see people in without their guard up. I just no pretense or nothing. That's why it's like, yo, I just want to get to know who you are. I might be interested in you. I might be attracted to you, but I just want to see you and allow you to be you, right? I don't want you to change for me. I don't want to change for you. I want us to be who we are so that we can truly identify whether or not we naturally share the same values. And then we can move forward if we want to take it there. But if not, we can just be cool. I'm good with that. Right. So, um, do you like this person as a person? The second one was, does she have values that I would want my children to have? In other words, are they someone I want my children to model their life after? This is huge. Like, this is this is one of the questions that it's like, yo, do they have the types of values when it comes to one faith? When it comes to, and then specifically, what about their faith? Right? Are they just people who say they go to church? Are they just people that say they love God? Like, how does the Bible and how does Christ govern their life? How does he govern what they do and what they don't do? What are some of the struggles that they have, that as being a believer and trying to act, are they actually trying to live this out? Or are they just like, oh, Jesus loves me? Like, that's not what I'm about. So you can't be with someone who's just like, oh, I got a relationship with God. No, 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 no. We're not doing that, because that's not what I'm trying to actively live this out. I'm struggling through all this. I'm fighting to obey the Lord. I'm fighting to put my flesh to death. I'm fighting. Can you fight with me? Or is this just, oh, you too strict, and you don't want to have fun, and is your life, if that's what your life is about, then that's not what I'm about. I do like to have fun. I do like to let loose and things of that nature, but there's a certain boundary that I'm just not going to cross. And if you're willing to, and if you want to be in a certain environment, there's certain environments I just don't go in. There's certain environments I don't want to be around. So it's like, yo, if they don't share that, there's nothing wrong with that, but yo, that's not for you. So being able to identify the values that someone has. Um, and first and foremost, being able to identify the values you have so that you can see whether or not they are in alignment with it. You know, if they like going to clubs and bars, I don't do that. It's not my space. So you know, what I mean, they want to go and you know, hookah and drink. It's not what I do. So it's just like, nah, you know, she could be gorgeous. She could go to church every week. I'm not going to church on Sunday and then acting, you know, wild and crazy on Monday through Saturday. That's just not what I do. And then saying God will forgive me. Yeah, he will, but this is not about his forgiveness. God forgives everybody, right? He made forgiveness possible for everybody. But you can't reconcile and be in relationship with him living how you want. So I don't just go and do whatever it is that I want to do. And I don't even like the taste of alcohol. So it's just like, that's a no for me. I got, you know, family issues around that. It's just not what I do anyways. Is she a giver, right? With boundaries. I know, you know, as a believer, you can find yourself believing that you got to give everything away. It's like, no, that's not even in God. You know, we talk, does she tithe and all? No, is she a giver? I don't, you know what I mean, I don't necessarily tithe. Um, I did it for 15 years and then God was like, he started to show me some stuff. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. It doesn't mean I don't give. It doesn't mean I don't want to tithe. But he's like, yo, you can't do that in this position. The children of Israel tithe, they weren't in debt. So you can't live that life and then try to sew your way out of, you know, by giving to the church. It's not going to work. So, you know, other people might say that's what it is. If God puts it on your heart to do something and he puts it on my heart to give or whatever, and he wants to bless me because of that, then amen. But I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm going to sew my way out of this. No, that's about as practical as gambling. And I'm no longer operating in a gambling faith, just not. So, you know, having now again, if she tithes, I don't mind that. I'm trying to get back to a place where I can tithe, but I understand that certain situations require a prudency that trying to be reckless and prove that you trust God is just not wise. So, does she share values that you have? The other one that I know is very, very important to me. Is she resourceful? Can she take care of herself and our children without a man? The reason why this is important to me is because if something, God forbid, happened to me, I know that, you know, when I get married again, and if, you know, again, we had children and again, God forbid something was to happen to me, I'm okay with her being with someone else. I used to be a stepfather, right? And having been in that situation, it could be a hit or miss. It could go really, really well, or it could go really, really bad. And one of the things that I know is that if she can't take care of herself and she can't take care of the children by herself, she's more desperate and more willing to accept anything in her life. And that puts your children at risk. I remember my uncle telling me one time he had got a divorce and he has 5 children. And he was telling me how, you know, he always took care of her and, you know, by taking care of her, he knew as long as she was straight, the kids were straight. So in essence, he was like, I was putting her in a position where she didn't have to worry about anything because I had it, even though we weren't together, so that nobody could just come into my children's lives and do whatever they wanted because she didn't need anything. Now, she might wanted to be with a man, but she was at a point where she didn't necessarily want to be dating or whatever, whatever. Um, but he was like, nah, as long as she's straight, then my kids are straight. And I don't have children, right? Biologically, that come has come through my wounds. But I'm thinking about, okay, if something was to happen to me, I wouldn't want her to, live a life for the rest of her life by herself. But I don't want her to be in a position where she is in such dire need that she accepts anyone or anything. So, can she take care of herself and our children without a man? Because then she can choose. Then she can vet. Then she can be wise, right? Then she can wait and allow the Lord to be. She can wait patiently and allow the Lord to lead her. Now, God forbid that happens. But what I'm saying is, these are the things that are important to. I think about these things, um, and the last question that I have is, Charles, are you the type of person you want your child to marry? In other words, not only are you the type of person do you want your child to marry, but are you the type of person you want your child to emulate? For my daughter, I would want my daughter to marry a man like me. And then my son, I would want my son to to be uh, the type of man that I am, so that he could be that to his wife. And these are the types of things that, govern how I'm moving. Even, I always said, I want to live a life worth living. And what that meant was, I want to live a life that, you know, when I when I passed, I could say I was pleased with how I lived my life. But also, part two to that was I wanted to live a life that my children would want to pattern their life after, in terms of my character and how I handle things. Am I perfect? No. But do I strive to improve um, in who I am as a person all the time? That's who I am. Kaizen is um, I think it's a Japanese word for constant improvement. And I'm constantly trying to improve, trying to get better, trying to figure out how can I do this better? How can I be better? Right. And that's what, living a life worth living means to me. If my children, like, okay, so as a young man, one of the things that bothered me, and it still bothers me to this day, not so much because it's not at the forefront of my mind all the time, but it still bothers me very much as it did when it kind of hit me. When we were younger, you would ask a child who they wanted to be like when they grew up, and they would say, for me, I wanted to be like MJ, right? I wanted to be Michael Jordan. I wanted to be like Michael Jordan, right? Basketball was my love, and I just resonated with his desire to win and to keep going despite adversity, and just his overall desire to be great in the sport of basketball. What's interesting is that as I got older, and I noticed kids being asked the same question, they would always say they wanted to be a celebrity. And it bothered me because I'm like, yo, these kids have parents in their lives who, they provide a great life for them. And I mean, they're just wonderful people. Now, nobody knows what's going on behind closed doors. I'm not saying that, right? But when you look at everything, it's like, yo, they got They seem to have really good relationship with the kids and so forth and so on. But when their kids are asked who they want to be like, they don't say their parents. They say some celebrity. And that's where that I want to live a life worth living came from. Because it dawned on me that your greatest achievement is living a life that is honorable and that your children say, I want to be like my dad or my mom when I grow up. Yeah, I want to make a lot of money, but in terms of who I want to be like as a person, I want to be like my dad. I want to be like my mom. Like I don't think there's any greater outside of God saying, well done. But I think that's in the you know what I mean? The well done is in what your children desire to pattern their lives. Now I've gotten I've met some some gentlemen who like my boy Tim, who I love. He would always tell stories about how his dad um told him to do certain things, and he would just honor his father. And you can in the stories he tell, you can tell, yo, he's just like his dad. And I've had conversations with his dad. You know what I mean? It's just like, yo, that right there is what I'm talking about. It's That's what I'm talking about. Where you have this, you set this standard for your children, um, that they know that they can meet because you've trained them to meet it. And now they can take what you have given them and they can instill it in their children, and so forth and so on. So these are the types of questions that I'm thinking about when it comes to being married again. And the person that I believe the Lord has for me, I'm still, again, praying and trying to get further and further confirmation if this is him. I'm just like, okay, Lord, I'm not pursuing anything until you say, but she has all of those things. And that was what struck me. It was like, yo, I really like her, based on what I know, I really like her as a person. She has values that I would want my children to have. Um, she's resourceful and she can take care of herself and our children. God forbid something happened to me. And again, am I the type of person that I want my daughter to marry or my son to be to his wife? And I'm like, yeah, I am. So I'm thankful for that. Not to big up myself, but it wasn't always this way. Um, I didn't like who I was. I was constantly in need of validation and didn't even realize it. I would self-sabotage because I was afraid of being abandoned. Um, I couldn't commit to anything. I would jump in and out of things all the time. There was so many different character flaws that I had. My intentions were always good. I never wanted to hurt anybody because I knew what it was like to be hurt, but I could be pushed to a point where I would want to hurt you and I would want to hurt you bad. I'm still working on pride, trying to remove that as much as possible and learning to humble myself before the Lord and entrusting myself to Him. So, by no stretch of the imagination am I saying like I'm this great dude, because I'm not. But the foundation of who I am, my heart's intent, and the work that I try to do to match my behavior with the heart that God has given me that's in alignment with Him, it's there. My trust in the Lord, my willingness to try and try again and try again and try again, my desire to improve and grow, my my love for learning and creating, my 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 strategic mind. There's just a lot of stuff that I think is pretty cool about me that I just didn't value, um, and see for very long. I see it here and there, and things of that nature. But I'm proud of the man that become. It's hard being this man because you have to make a lot of sacrifices. You have to do that which is in the best interest of you and everyone else. You have to deny yourself things that your desires want you to have and might feel good in the moment, but will cause major problems over your lifetime. You have to restrict yourself from being in places that you would love to enjoy, uh, because you just don't want to set a precedent that could create some things that you don't want to be involved in. There's a lot of things that go into trying to be an honorable man who loves God. Um, but I think the great thing that I'm learning, about being a man of God and just being a man, is that I have weaknesses and I can no longer operate as if I don't. And no longer being shy about sharing the struggles that I have as a man, whether, you know, so that I'm not, one, being deceptive to myself, and two, my spouse, my children even, can be a support when I don't have the strength. So these are the things that I think about, man. What's your criteria for choosing a mate or a friend? Is it similar? Is it different? If different, what are your criteria? What are some things that you look for in a friend or a mate? And, what are some things about yourself that you really like? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. As always, um, don't try to change the world. Instead, build you, and your world will transform. Until next time, peace.